start, shall we? If I just run through what I'm going to be using today to start with. So this is where we're headed. I do love these stencils and the embossing folder and the die. It's just my sort of thing. I don't do a huge amount of Christmas, but this is just me. I love this. So let's just run through what I'm going to be using today. So obviously the brand new, the layering stencils Christmas wreath, and obviously the matching embossing folder, which obviously comes with its die. These are just made for me. They're just perfect. So that's the mainstay of my card. Now the example card uses papers from A Very Festive Season, and I think I've said to you before, the quality and the designs in these pads are just amazing. The papers that I've used today come from A Christmas Romance, equally as beautiful. If I'd got to choose a favourite, it would have to be this one, just because of the colours in it. I like it, but this is, if you're more traditional, this is perfect for you. If you're not as traditional, go for this one. Those are the papers, and then obviously I'm using the Nested Stitch Bubble Squares as my base for my card. So the background piece and then the layered piece on top. Okay, so as I said, this is where we're headed, but we're not doing these colours today. I wanted to do something different rather than just ordinary reds and greens. So I'm going for blues and sort of white, but maybe cream today. Okay, so I'll just put this to one side and we'll just run through the stencils. So layer 1 and layer 2 are both sets of leaves, and I've done these in two different colours. So I'm starting off with Speckled Egg, beautiful colour, subtle. Now I'm doing this on Lisa's textured card, just because I wanted it to look a little bit different. Now when you're stenciling onto textured card, it takes a little bit longer, and I would say use a little bit more pressure, just because it's a textured card and you want to go into all those into all that weave on the card. Fabulous cardstock, fabulous quality, beautiful colours, Lisa's sort of staple colours. I've also used satin cardstock on for my bubble layer of card. Okay, so that's my Speckled Egg, and just before I take that off, I am going to go around the edges just with a little bit of Salty Ocean. I know that sounds weird, but I just wanted a touch of blue through those leaves. Not much, just a little bit, just because I think it adds a little bit of interest and just makes it look different from the norm. And you'll see that I'm taking most of my ink off the stencil rather than re-inking my brush all the time, because you don't want much, just enough to add a little bit of interest. Yeah, like that. Okay, in with number 2. Let's put that to one side for a second. In with number 2. Now I'm doing these leaves a slightly different colour, so I went with Speckled Egg on the first layer, and I'm going with Weathered Wood. And I know that sounds a little bit strange, but I just think it gives enough of a contrast without being too different. So it does look quite grey when you first start putting it on. It's a sort of a bluey grey, but when I've finished, I'll actually bent that up a little bit. If you clean your stencils, which I know Lisa doesn't always, just be mindful when you're drying them off that you don't lift some of the small pieces of the stencils when you're drying them, because I mean you can bend them back because the mylar's quite thick, but if you take a little bit of extra care when you're drying them off or washing them or whatever you want to do, then it won't bend in the first place. And I know that because I did. So you learn from your mistakes and you can pass it on to others. So that's my weathered wood, and again I'm going to do the same with the salty ocean. Just run through the centre of those leaves with that blue, just to give an added little bit of interest. Not a great deal, just a tiny little bit, just on the centres and the edges. I'll do. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so now we're coming to the flowers. Now, on the first one that I tried, I used antique linen, and it's a little bit too creamy for me. So then I tried picket fence. Now I haven't got an oxide in picket fence, and I'm not sure they do one. So I used a cheapy brush with picket fence, but I don't know, I still wasn't happy, so I'm going to use something completely different. This is a white Colour Cloud blending ink in white, and I'm just rubbing it. It's actually a bit more like a paint, and it will take a while to just wash off your stencils, but I would say wash your stencils as quick as you can when you've used it, just because it sort of sticks on your stencils like an emulsion really. But it does give a white finish, which, you know, there aren't many white ink pads out there, are there? But I did want white as opposed to cream, and really this is still creamy as opposed to white, but it's the whitest thing that I've got at the moment. So okay, that'll do for that. See, it is quite white, but the only downside to it is also quite wet, so you will have to be careful when you're doing your next layers. All right, layer number 4, and again this is going to be white. So actually, before I do that, I am going to go back in with this, and I am just going to add a tiny little bit of blue just around the edges of those leaves, those petals rather. I'm not sure whether this is going to work because I've got that sort of cloud on there, but I just wanted to just add a little bit of, yeah, we'll go with that. Just really to add a little bit of interest on the edges of the leaves, and I mean right on the edges, as I'm not hardly going into these petals at all. And it's just so that when you put the next layer on, it'll sort of differentiate between the two layers because they're both white. So I just wanted to do something a little bit different to the normal red and green. Let's just make sure that's, yeah, happy with this. Okay, just quick, yeah, like that. Just gives it a little, something a little bit different. You know, it's just to lift little parts of it so that it looks a little bit different to the norm. So again, I'm going in with the white, and hopefully this will then hide any places where you've gone a little bit too far in with the blue, but it will just lift the centres of those flowers in white. Yeah, I like that. And you can't really see the centres, but once I put the middles in, that'll show up even more. Now then, these little buds I did in, what colour did I do them on the original? I did them in antique linen, but because I'm using the sort of colours I'm using today, antique linen won't look right. So I'm actually going in with iced spruce. And again, it sounds a bit weird because if you look at that colour, it looks quite grey. It's a sort of a greeny grey, but when you add it on this with the other colours you've used, it sort of lifts it so that it doesn't look quite as grey as you think it's going to. So it looks more greeny grey, which is what it's supposed to be. But I do like the effect. I think it looks really, really lovely when you've finished. So again, I'm going around in circular motions just because these apertures are quite tiny, and I think circular motions tend to move the ink around a little bit better than if you swipe backwards and forwards. You do whatever works for you, really. It's just I find it gives me a better coverage doing it this way. So you do whatever you feel happy with, and whatever you know, the outcome that you get doing it your way, then that's brilliant. So quick, easy, and you can always go back and add a little bit more colour if you need to. I would start off light, especially with a dark colour like this, and start off quite light, and then you can always go in and add some more. You know, you can add loads of colour, but once it's down you can't take it away, can you? So I think I'm happy with that. Yeah, I like that. Right, layer 6, 8 layers to this stencil set, but it is so worth it. So I'm going in on the veins on all the leaves now, and I'm going in with prize ribbon. I did use Blueprint Sketch or chipped sapphire on a couple of the other samples that I did while I was messing around, but this one for me is spot on the right colour. So it's just about having a mess with the colours that you've got and just seeing which works for you. What looks right to one won't look right to another, but you know, there is no wrong way and there isn't any wrong colour. It's whatever you choose to do, to be honest. We're all different, and so are plants. And who says poinsettias have to be red? I know there are white ones out there, but I think the white ones that you get in the shops tend to have sort of a green vein on them. I didn't want to go with greens today. I wanted to stick with the blues because I just like the tones. I just think they're perfect for Christmas. Okay, nearly done. And then we've just got the veins on the flowers and the little tops on all those buds, just to finish it off. But I do think it's a beautiful layering stencil that you can have loads of fun with. I like that. Yeah, happy with that. I like that. Okay, so we're going in to the centres of the flowers. I'm going in with speckled egg on the centres because the ice spruce is going on the veins of the flowers. So I wanted this to be a centre that stands out but doesn't sort of hit you in the face, because obviously when you put the little sort of seed heads on, you need those to look really obvious. So the speckled egg gives it a colour but doesn't go over the top. Yeah, I like that. I mean, how beautiful does this look? Not my colours necessarily, just the layering stencils. I think it is absolutely gorgeous. Okay, so we're going in with our iced spruce. Now I'm doing iced spruce on the flowers and the little bits of stalk on these buds here, but the actual bud heads are going to be a bright blue. Alright, so I'm going in the centre first and then out on the leaves and those little stems, and then we'll go back in afterwards with the blue just to finish it off. So I'm dabbing in the middle where that little seed head is, and then circular movements in all the veins on those petals, just so that I fill every little piece of those veins. But obviously I want those seed heads to be prominent. So by sort of dabbing as opposed to circular movements, I'll get more ink where I want it. Okay, so I'll do Ice Spruce, put that to one side, and then I'm going back in with this blueprint sketch just on those little bud heads. And again, I'm dabbing. Now I'm not being skimpy with this colour at all, because I really want these blues to stand out. So I'm dabbing as opposed to circular movements, or sort of a little bit of both, just so that you can fill those little seed heads full of colour. I mean, you could have used a different colour, you know, completely. You could have gone with like a deep burgundy or a deep purple. So, you know, your colour choices, as I've said before, are totally up to you. It's whatever you feel comfortable with, whatever you choose. We don't have to abide by the normal colours that we see in nature if we don't want to. It's called artistic license, I think, and I like it. We'll just add a little bit more up there on that top one, because it didn't really catch it, and a bit more down there. See, that's the beauty of this Ultimate system, is that you can lift it off and put it back down numerous times and know that you're in exactly the right place every single time, rather than having to faff around with inking through little holes. I think that's, you know, it's just a waste of time for me. So there you go, there's my stencil. I mean, how long did that take me? A while, but it's so satisfying. It's just so worth taking the time to just spend a little bit of mindful time just inking through your stencil. I just think that's fabulous. So then you would use your die to cut it out with. Place your die on here, and it's a repetitive pattern, so your die is going to fit any way round, just so long as you fit it all around the leaves, and then pop it on your die cutting machine and cut it out. Okay, and then once you've cut it out, slide it back into your embossing folder and emboss it. Okay, now obviously I've done one ahead of time because I didn't want to be cutting and embossing on camera, because it just takes up a little bit of time that I haven't really got. So there's my background, and like I said, I've used the satin card. I've used grey on this occasion. It is a beautiful grey. It's not one I've used before, but I just thought it was a little bit different. And then the papers that I've used, like I said, came from A Christmas Romance set. And these background papers, for me, just sort of, they're just perfect. They just fit with, there's enough pattern on it to not distract from your main bit of stenciling, but there's not too much, if you're with me. I mean, there are other patterns in there, but for me, these on here were good. And I just happened to notice that with this being a snowflake background, if I put my die in the right place, I could get the snowflake more or less in the middle. So when I come to add my embossed wreath on there, I've got a snowflake that virtually sits in the middle. Can you see that? So the snowflake sits in the middle of that wreath, and I just think that sort of finishes it off, really. Just like a nice little focal point. Not that you're going to see much of it, because I'm going to cover it up in a minute. Not all of it. So I've already put my 3D pads on. I've already stuck this down, and I've 3D'd that as well. So I just take these off here. Then I can add my backing paper down here. Make sure I've got it the right way up, I think it is. And then just place that in the middle of those bubble squares. Like so. And then I can add my wreath. Now I've sort of worked my way around this, and I've decided that when I stenciled, these two sets of leaves are the same colour. So I've got a weathered wood, 2 weathered woods, and then these two were the speckled egg. So I've put the 2 weathered woods at the top. So I've put a little mark on the top just so as I know which way round it is. And I wanted a single poinsettia at the top and then the others around. So I wanted the central poinsettia to be at the top rather than at the bottom, if you're with me. So I've already added my pads to these as well, and you'll see I've split the pads just to fit the leaves, because if you try and put them on in full, you'll end up having to mess around and cut little bits off your pads before you stick it down, because they'll sit proud of your wreath shape if you try and use a complete pad. So just take a little bit of extra time, cut them down and just fit them to where they go, and then you won't have any overhang. Okay, so there's my top one, and my top one is going down there like so. See, the snowflake's not quite in the middle, but as my nan used to say, a blind man on a galloping horse won't see that. Okay, so there's my wreath on my background. Now I've also used the festive tatty words. If you've got Lisa's original tatty words, you will know how fabulous they are. Now I would normally mat and layer these onto the same card that I'd done the bubble square out of, but because it's grey and these are sort of grey tones, I knew it wouldn't stand out enough. So I've cut one in silver Euphoria glitter card, and the other one is cut in the navy satin card of Lisa's, so that it gives it a drop shadow and you can actually see the words, because if I just put it in silver it probably wouldn't stand out very much, would it? So if I just add my glue on the back of there, now I only need to add glue to either end. I'm not going to have any glue where I don't need it. Okay, so I'm only putting it right on the very end letters, not putting any in the middle, and then just stick it down either end. Okay, so make sure it's round about in the middle and stick it down, and if you pull it gently at each end, it'll keep it taut and it won't drop in the middle. Okay, let me see that. That actually sits quite proud in the middle of that card. I'll just wait for my camera to catch up so that you can see that sits quite proud of that background, which is exactly what I want. Okay, now then, I would normally put gems around the side here, but what I thought I would do is, rather than waste all those little dots out of the bubble squares, I'd use those as my gems around the outside. That's what I did on the green one. I just used the bigger circles out of the bubble squares and just put those on the card as my gems, if you like. I just add these around the edge of the card, and I just think they finish it off and it all ties in with the right colours. So there's today's. There's the one that I did as my example, but I also did another one, and as I said, I used antique linen on the other one that I did. So this was the other one, and this morning my pastes arrived from Lisa, so I ordered these, the gel mediums. I've used the gloss one, and I've literally just painted it on this morning. Took about half an hour to dry, but it does give it a really nice shine. Now if I'd had a little bit more time, what I would have done is mixed some of that with a little bit of either mica or glitter and brushed it on, and then it would have given it a really nice sparkle. But I'm going to use this on another project. Okay, so I've got two to use, the one I've done today and this one that I'd already done yesterday, but I think it just gives it enough of a shine just to make it stand out a little bit different. Okay, so there you go, those are my cards for today. So I'm going to love you and leave you there. Thank you so much for joining me today. Have a fabulous week, everybody. Bye for now.